Let's go on a journey through human history in 500 pages. Welcome back, Mere Mortalites, to another edition of the book reviews here at the Mere Mortals. A time for us to share all of the wonderful information that we gain from books. And yes, you haven't heard from me for a little while. Why? I have been deep in the thickness of Sapiens. Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. Now this thick, almost 500 pages book wanders through the story of human history, as you can tell by the name Sapiens, of Homo sapiens, or I guess that's the scientific name for our old ancestry of where we sort of come from. And diving right into the actual book itself. I believe it was 2014. Now, I was going to make sure going through this. It was written in 2014, I believe. Don't get me wrong here, Yuval. But 2014, originally Yuval actually created this book from lecture notes. So I actually listened to a recent interview of his. It was actually ones that he actually written in Hebrew. He was giving out to his students, and he was able to really quickly weed out the bullshit of them and make sure that he was actually explaining things really, really clearly. Now, from that, he was able to transition to this book. Now, if you have heard here at the Mere Mortals, Karen has actually done a lot of book reviews, and he often finds that things that get translated from memoirs, from speeches, from notes such as like that, often can end up finding a book that isn't as clear and not as concise as you might approach a normal book. But that isn't the case with Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. The book does really well to space out over, and I'm being dead serious, over 20 chapters, just under 500 pages, basically everything in human history. It doesn't touch into every single little minutiae, of course you cannot, but what it tries to do is it starts right back to 70, 80,000 years ago from the very first few chapters, and basically describes how that evolution of mind, spirit, the way that we interacted with money, the way that we interacted with the ideas that we brought, whether that was religion, ideals, capitalism, why we went down the path of imperialism, capitalism, you name it, it's probably in this book. And it also reflected a lot of things that I've read in other places as well. He makes a lot of references here to books of myself, Karen. I've read before, and as mere mortals, we've probably heard of us talk quite a bit about. So the book does fantastic to just go end to end on that human history path. Now, what for me made this book a little bit different, because if I've just described it to you like that, you might feel like it's going to be a historical piece. No, we might first began in a little bit of insight. Karen actually began reading Sapiens for a little while, and he didn't enjoy it. He actually didn't enjoy a lot of it right at the beginning and stopped reading it. The first few pages can be a little bit like that. You might think going into Sapiens that it is more historically based. It's going to tell you about how we evolved, where we might have moved, just the idea of money, capitalism, etc. And that sounds dry. And I got to tell you, the first few pages, it did feel like it was going to go down that path. But Yuval's able to do something quite amazing that I have never seen done with a history book. He was able to, and this goes back to the way that he originally wrote it, kind of take away that technical, that very dry view of history, and he just sort of was able to bring some wit, some humor, and some real nice storytelling into the book. And it just made it come to life. It really was able to get you engaged, or at least get me engaged in reading and picking up a lot of those historical notes. And one of the things I actually feel when I go through a book and I'm trying to understand, how good was this book? Or what are some of the things that I'm seeing that is telling me that it's going to be a good book? I took, and I'm sorry I can't actually show you too much. So normally I might actually put it up on the screen here. So a little bit of an image, but I took so many notes going through this book, and it really was giving me a bit of a struggle and go, what am I going to go into the synopsis, and how am I going to explain? I actually genuinely can't tell you how many things this book has, apart from being able to tell you that it's got a chronological order of all of the great triumphs and great disasters and the great ideas of human history. It just packs so many things in. And maybe to give you another example, there was a particular 2 pages in this book where it encapsulated probably what I've been reading over the last 6 months into 2 pages. And it was able to just clarify and simplify so many things in those 2 pages that I had to stop, really, really think about it and go, wow, I can't believe that summarized it that well. So Synopsis for me, so much information in this book, it's not even funny. You will find so many things that you'll find of interest. And if it's not on one page, it'll be on the other. Some personal observations of the book myself. I'm actually going to go to my notes here because I literally took probably 3 to 4 sentences per chapter, and I genuinely don't do this a lot. But the biggest personal observation for me was, amongst a lot of things, the conversation that spawned out one of the chapters around the ideal, the construct that we build things around. And that's things like the example he gives in the book is Peugeot. I always get this name wrong, but basically a car company. Let's say Holden, right? That's the company that he's saying in this book. But Holden, the idea that it was started by a particular individual, right? Everyone's working for a car company. And if you say the word Holden or if you say the word Lamborghini or Volkswagen, you kind of imagine it as this entity, as this thing, right? Like they have cars or they have the spirit. But then just logically looking at that, obviously from different perspectives around, this is, we've all just made this up, right? We've made up the fact of, well, one, the whole structuring that it's a company, it's a legal entity. That's all a made up construct by humans, right? A chimpanzee doesn't think that, Volkswagen or Lamborghini or whatever it may be is a company with a legal construct. No, that's not even within their imagination, right? So it's just the amount of things that we as humans, as sapiens, have built up to be in our imagination, whether, and this book sort of points out, whether it's religion, whether it's companies, whether it's just the idea of mortality, the idea of culture. All of these things, I think one of the great quotes I actually pulled out from this one was, biology enables, culture forbids. But it just goes to heart, and I'm not going to say it blew my mind, but it was there enough times that it made me open my eyes and really think through that it was probably the biggest personal takeaway for me. Just that shift in mindset, that kind of taking it back and looking at things in a different line. And, broadly, now apart from that concept, the book did well to do that in just about every other aspect. Right at the tail end of the book, as we're sort of finishing up, Yuval's actually talking all around the future, right? Where are we going to go as sapiens? Are we going to become cyborgs? The machine's going to take over? Are we going to be a bit of a mixture? Are we going to have chips in our brain? He brings in all these points, and he does a really wonderful job to really present an idea, give it its light, and then demonstrate perhaps why it might not be the right one, or perhaps why it doesn't have enough information to be valid. But right at the sort of tail end, there was a conversation happening as well around happiness. And the question posed was, look, are we happier than our ancestors? Are we happier than the medieval people finding a way? Are we happier than people who lived in caves 40,000 years ago? Now, there wasn't, and there isn't through this book, answers. You're not going to get the answers that are going to say, oh yeah, this is what it is. Nor is Yuval trying to say, like, I know all the answers. He's more exposing that question and playing through a couple of ideas around, okay, well, what is happiness based on? Is it based on, a lot of people say, relationships and the company that you have? Is it money? Is it assets? Is it pure from a biological perspective? Is it the dopamine release that actually gives you that happiness? So in all these different versions, you can have different answers to that question. It just, again, struck to me that a book here where you might initially have a look at it and you go, oh yeah, it's a brief history of humankind, actually delves into very tough philosophical questions, or very hard questions that people are really not asking about, but is able to do it in such a, I don't want to say basic, in a just very simple, in a very well-written, well-thought-out way that gets you engaged and gets you going and thinking through those processes really easily. And without the fact of, having to, read through multiple pages to kind of understand, where he's getting into. At the same time, and I've got to go on, he's able to do this through storytelling. And one of the books where I thought was going to hit the mark, and it didn't for me, was The Hero, is it? Oh, Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces. I believe that's what it is. Whatever. You know the one I'm talking about. We haven't reviewed it. I'll pull the link just here. But in that particular book, it was just so heavy in stories and so heavy in the technical merging that for me, it just didn't seem clear. This was the complete opposite. There were plenty of stories in there, but so well written, so well finalized, summarized that you kind of came away going, wow, I've picked up every little scarab of information that I should have been taking away from that. So, Me Immortals, what are my final thoughts on Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari? Look, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. This was the best book I have ever read to date. I gave it a 9.5 out of 10. I read this fairly slowly. It took me over a month, and it took me over a month because I basically enjoyed every little bit that I was reading. I was probably reading, let's say, 4 to 5, 6, 7 pages maybe every day. Not for wanting to actually want to read more. Like I did want to read more. I just didn't have too much time in the last couple of weeks. But it also was a wonderful way to read it because it was just able to drip feed so much information, and I was able to step away, take that information, kind of settle it in my brain, and then go again for everything else that was in there. Just obviously top of the list for me. I could not think of a better book, and the way that it was written, the way it's summarized. Basically, all of life journey in 500 pages, and all of the powerful ideas, powerful constructs, and even the greatest takeaway for me was just looking at things in a different light. The ability to poke at ideas, both in that straw man, steel man sort of perspective, to look at it from a data-led perspective as well, and not just see things at the face of it. And again, that big takeaway for me around the construct and the ideas, it got me also thinking, what am I looking at in the world that I'm also imposing as the reality, but ultimately it is just my subjectivity that I'm putting in, and just making it what it is. That's it, Me Immortals. I could go on and on and on about how I enjoy this book, so I cannot recommend it enough. Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, A Brief History of Humankind. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed the book review today. I might have been a little bit overzealous for my love of it, but if you could, of course, go on all the platforms that you may wish to and interact with us. If you're Valley for Valley enabled, as Karen talks about a lot, and let me tell you, he even talks about it a lot in person, feel free to send through some boostergrams, feel free to connect, get engaged. It's going to be the future, folks. It's going to be the future. Wherever you are in the world, Me Immortalites, Juan out.